Thank you for joining us at the ever-improving No Soundbites Allowed podcast. My name is Michael Vasquez. We thank you for joining us in this adventure of describing the politics that go on in our nation on a personal and local level as often as possible, giving you, the audience, more than just 30 seconds to understand what's going on in our nation. We look forward to joining you as we go. Just sit back, enjoy the ride. Please remember, if you like the episodes, like it, share it, let other people know, and if you can, please donate, even if it's $2, even if it's $5, because it all makes a difference. We thank you, and here we go. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me. That's right, it's your favorite host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. I am here with you today, and, I just appreciate being with you every day. And I want to thank you, every one of you, for being here with me and listening to the program, because it's invaluable. You make it all worthwhile. So I do want to thank you for that. Now, I did want to start off today, and we want to talk a little bit about a couple of things. There's a couple of bits of news, old news, that no one's been talking about. But before I even get to that, let me actually stop. I know the podcast is late. It should be done on Saturday, and usually it is. It was a very hectic weekend this weekend, getting a lot of work done. We have, as many people may be aware, I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Broome County Adopt a Park, and we do the movies in the parks. We did that last year. A couple thousand people were able to come out free of charge, go into the parks in and around Broome County, and were able to enjoy seeing family-friendly movies. And we really had a great time doing that. Served over 2,000 families, and we're going to be doing it again in 2018. We're going to be coming up with our first movie, which will be Frozen, which will be in Otsiningo Park on June 29th. We're looking forward to that. Should be very exciting. We do have a couple slots left open. If you are a business and you wish to advertise, please contact me, and I can tell you about that process and what we do for the different levels of sponsors for the event. It helps us get movies out to the families out there, and it's very important. So that's one of the things we're working on. Confirmed that I will be having an interview with County Executive Jason Garnar. I did confirm that I will be going out and doing a ride-along with the Binghamton Police Department, just to get to understand exactly what is they go through, and I will be taping that, so I will be providing that to you. So there was a lot of events going on. Then we have the upcoming June primary, the primaries for September, the state level and lower level elections for 2018. And so that's coming up, and there's a bunch of campaigns I've been speaking with about that. So that should be interesting as well. So all in all, it's been a busy weekend, plus doing the SUNY Broome Republicans podcast, as well as a Facebook Live podcast, which you may have seen. So that kept me very busy. But all of that put together, and putting that all together, that meant that I was late today, and I'm doing the podcast on Monday instead of the usual Saturday that I usually do. Not a problem. Now, but what I wanted to talk about first, and you can hear some background noise there. There's construction next door to me. But what I want to go over is a couple of the news stories that no one's been talking about. How every so often there's a lot of outrage in our nation. Everyone goes crazy. Everyone's screaming, talking about this issue or that issue, and it's hyped up in the newspapers and on talk radio and on the cable networks. And then they go on to the next story. That's part of the 24-hour news cycle. So they'll talk about it for a day, 2 days, maximum, maybe 3. Something really crazy, a week. And then it just goes away. Even the Parkland shooting and the whole issue about the Second Amendment and also banning guns and banning the Second Amendment went away, just gone. No one's talking about it anymore. Lasted a couple months because it was a very big issue. And even with the subsequent events, we haven't seen any more news about it. And that's partially because when we're looking at what happened in Ohio, when we're looking at Texas and Santa Fe, where we saw that individuals trained, qualified individual gun owners and firearm owners went out and they took down the aggressors, the crazed and criminal individuals who were trying to prey upon innocents. They were stopped because of good Samaritans with firearms in those cases. And so that story didn't get promoted. It didn't get pushed throughout the rest of the media. And so that kind of let that story go with Parkland, which is kind of sad. But there are a few things that are going on that really should be followed up on. No one's been talking about it, and I want to talk about it. And one of the first ones I want to talk about is, if you remember, as a result of because of the Parkland shooting that we saw, Parkland, Florida, there was a big move to try and find some way to ban firearms, to deny the people of the United States the ability to protect themselves and take avail of the Second Amendment, which I disagree with. And one of the things that was a solution that came up that a lot of businesses, as well as governments, state governments, had taken was the idea of raising the age to own a firearm. And it was toyed with on a federal level as well, but never went forward. But several states did in fact go forward and say, okay, they're going to raise the age limit, in particular in Florida. Not that it mattered, because again, we've seen 14-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 20-year-olds, people who are not 21 get access to firearms. So to say that the law says that you can't have a firearm until you're over 21 doesn't matter. Matter of fact, in the Santa Fe shooting, I believe it was, the kid was 16, got his hands on a firearm. That's illegal already in the state of Florida. You can't do that, and he did it anyway. So I don't understand how this conveys any extra level of safety to anyone. It conveys an illusion of safety. I agree with that. It gives you the illusion of safety, but we have seen proven over and over again, just like with gun laws, it will not actually make you safe, and individuals who are either deranged or criminal will still get access to the firearms. And in the case of some of these shooters, they go and make bombs. They make bombs. So, which is absolutely illegal since 1934 and horrendous. So it's not actually protecting anyone. You know, it's like a gun-free zone. It doesn't actually protect anyone. Is it the law? Sure, but these are people who break the law purposefully. So how's it saving you? But that being said, the reason I wanted to go over this, and it's old news, but no one's been talking about it. Back in March, we also heard that Dick's Sporting Goods decided that they and Walmart decided that they would no longer allow anyone under the age of 21 to be able to buy a firearm in their stores. Dick's Sporting Goods, of course, even went further, taking firearms out of their stores and taking the anti-Second Amendment position and fighting against the Second Amendment, which has negatively impacted its stores, and that's a good thing because they're getting a backlash on that, as they should, from firearm owners across the United States. But that being said, but one of their things is they said, along with Walmart, that they would not allow anyone under 21 to be able to purchase a firearm in any of their stores in the entire nation of the United States. And that was a big deal. And then in March, I believe it was March 6th of 2018, a young man named Tyler Watson out of Oregon in the Jackson County, he's in Jackson County. He went out and he sued Walmart and Dick's Sporting Goods, saying that it is illegal, according to that state law, to deny someone any service based on their age discrimination. One of the very issues and policies of the far left and that whole PC movement is age discrimination. How dare you? And so he went and he sued them, saying that this is a matter of age discrimination. The law, state law and federal law, allows him to be able to have a firearm under the age of 21, and that he was being denied his rights. And so he put in the lawsuit. It was big news for all of a day. And that's, because you had a young man, 20 years old, fighting against the anti-Second Amendment movement and saying, I have rights and I want to stand up for them. And mind you, in Parkland, Florida, the high school students, everyone was cheering them for standing up for their right to be able to speak and to say that they didn't like the Second Amendment. But no one wants to hear a 20-year-old in Oregon stand up and say, well, I have a right too, and you can't take it away from me. Not arbitrarily. You can't do it that way. And what happened? He put in an injunction, and that was in April, and he's still going forward with his lawsuit, and no one's heard a word. Well, actually, in April 13th of 2018, he did get an answer. The injunction that he was seeking was to force Dick's Sporting Goods to allow him to go in and buy a firearm at the age of 20. That was denied. Jackson County Circuit Judge Ron Grinsky denied the motion on April 4th so that he could, and this was a temporary restraining order to stop Dick's from barring people under the age of 21 from buying a firearm. And the judge said, no, that's okay. They can go out there and they can stop someone from buying their firearms from Dick's until at least the end of the case where it will be finally resolved. Now, does that mean this case is going to stop and Dick's will be able to go ahead and make this decision? Maybe. Maybe not. It's not clear, but it does mean that this is still ongoing and it is still being fought. No one's paying attention to it. You just can't find news on this almost anywhere. The only place I could find anything on it was at themailtribune.com, and I will include that link. But otherwise, no one's talking about this. No one's following it up. Why not? These are the rights of American citizens who are fighting for them. This is a young man fighting for his civil rights, his constitutional rights, his God-given rights for the Second Amendment to be able to defend himself. And if he went into the military, he'd be handed a firearm to help defend our nation if he were in the military. But yet, as a civilian, he doesn't have the right to defend his own home, to protect himself against the government, to protect himself in any way. That's kind of sad. That's kind of upsetting. Actually, very upsetting. And so I'm following that story and I'm still watching on what's going on there and I'm still looking into this. And if you have more information about this, especially if you live in Oregon, please let me know. Or you know how to contact Tyler Watson. Ask him to give me a call, contact me. I would love to get his firsthand thoughts on this if his lawyer will allow him to talk about this because it shouldn't go away. It shouldn't be in the ether and denied attention by the media. We need to talk about this. We need to understand why Americans should have the right, even at the age of 20, to be able to have a firearm to protect themselves, just as they go out around the world and protect our nation under the age of 21. So that's something I wanted to bring up, and that's one of the stories that you haven't heard a whole lot about. One of the other things that you may want to follow up on, if you haven't already, is the fact that there is I've spoken about the red flag laws. Matter of fact, I believe it was on April 11th. I had done an article at the mvass.com website, my political commentary website. And I had written an article about they're sometimes called red flag laws. Sometimes they're called the extreme risk protection orders, or gun violence restraining orders, or just the symbol ERPO. They're all absolutely the exact same thing. These are laws that allow the government to take away your firearm with no recourse by you. How it works out, and I go into this in the article on April 11th, the red flag law allows the government, so say your neighbor sees you, they're upset with you for whatever reason. They go to the police or to the court and they say, I think Bob Johnson is a threat to himself and or the community, and you should take away his guns. The police, you go to the court, the judge goes over it, and there's a trial. You aren't invited into that trial. You don't get to have a single word about this. This is a trial that happens completely without you, and the police and the courts decide whether or not you may or may not be a danger to yourself and or the community. And if they decide, which why wouldn't they, they're going to go and decide that you're a threat, So they then get a warrant, come to your door, break down your door, go on in, and take your firearms. Just like that. Without any warning, without any due process to you, they come in, they take your firearms, and they say, you've got a year to prove that you are not a threat to yourself or to the community. And if you can prove that in the courts in the next year, we will give you back your firearms. At the end of the year, we'll give you back your firearms. And sorry for that if that's the case. Otherwise, you are now going to be at the whim of the courts on when and if you will ever get your firearms back. And people have fought this already. And even when they win, it's almost impossible for people to get back. I've heard from some sources that they're talking about individuals who have won these red flag law cases, and they have beaten the courts and proven that they are not a threat to anyone, and their firearm has gone missing. Just no one knows where it is. It's just disappeared into the ether. And then the government is saying, well, we'll pay you to give you a new firearm to replace the one you have, but that's a big troubling thing. What happened to the firearm they just took possession of? A firearm that by court order is supposed to be held by the government agencies until, at the very least, the first year when that person has the right to have their day in court and to finally get some due process and to challenge those people accusing them of being a danger. No one's been talking about that. No one's been talking about this issue. And guess what? In New York State, it's one of the states where this has been going on. It actually went through an ERPO, a red flag law, was put in as a bill in New York State. And that was bill number, it was in the assembly that it was submitted in. And that would be Assembly Bill, excuse me one second. That was Assembly Bill A6994. Again, I say that is A as in Alpha 6994. And that was sponsored by Assemblyman Kavanaugh, and that was back on, I had the date there. It was March 28th of 2017. This was a year ago. No one was really paying attention to it. And it was really quiet until the Parkland shooting this year. And it got passed through the assembly. It actually passed and went to the New York State Senate. And it was sitting there for a while. No one was talking about it. Well, the latest update on that, on the ability of the government to take your firearm without having you have any knowledge of it through essentially secret court meetings, and between the courts and the police, and come take your firearms. What happened is that has now gone, and it was struck down, and it is going back to committee with the state Senate. I strongly recommend that you speak, that if you are in New York State, and check this out in your own state because it may have something similar, but in New York State, speak to your state senator about Bill S as in Sierra 5447. Again, I say that is S as in Sierra 5447. Look that up. Tell them to not vote for that. And by the way, no, that's me. That's not a computer. That's just how I do numbers sometimes. And yes, tell them that you are against this bill and that you want your due process. You want to protect your Fourth Amendment rights of your home, not having them invaded. You want to protect your property. Again, the Fourth Amendment. You want to be able to protect your due process, primary rule of law in this nation. You want to protect your privacy. You want to be able to protect your Second Amendment as well. There's a lot of laws and regulations here that need to be upheld. No one's talking about it. I think it's important, so I wanted to bring it up. And with that is the first segment. Went over a little bit. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about some more recent issues, not old news, but new news, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. And I'm going to do something a little different. We have a new band actually a new singer, an artist named Matt Cornwell, and he's got a wonderful album. It's called Icarus. And we're going to play the 12th track from his Icarus album, and that is the Break the Habit. And then we'll come right back.
I ain't had you waste. I don't even remember how you taste on my lips. Used to be something I needed. Now I see I had a reason. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Then you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed you. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habits that I had, 'cause look where it's got me. Searching for myself, didn't know I lost me. I ain't no saint. Let the devil have a way. I regret it every day. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed you. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the.
All right, folks, I hope everyone enjoyed that. That was, again, Matt Cornwell, and he's a great artist. I think he's doing a great job. I hope you like that song. I have another one of his tracks in our next break as well. Also, this is No Soundbites Allowed, the favorite podcast on politics out there. And this is your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, talking about a bunch of issues. Now, we first started off just covering some news that fell off the face of the earth, essentially. The major news media just stopped talking about it because of lots of reasons. It didn't fit the narrative that the far left tends to enjoy, and they tend to be in charge of the news media. But yet still important issues that we need to talk about and to go over. And so I wanted to make sure I had covered that for you. And I am continuing to look at this, and I will continue to be going over these issues as I have been for the last decade. But I also want to move on a little bit and talk about something else that I thought that was really important. And I mentioned this a little bit on Saturday. I spoke about it on the SUNY Broom Republicans podcast, where I am a co-host along with Michael Woodward, talking about the issues affecting SUNY Broome and SUNY Binghamton, as well as the community. But I want to talk about this also just here as well, because I think it's important. Because the rights we have are important, all of them. And while I believe the cornerstone is the Second Amendment, it allows all the other amendments to be able to be effective. one of the most important ones is the First Amendment, no doubt. And I am a major advocate of the First Amendment, and I believe in it strongly. And something I found that was really troubling to me is that across the state and across the nation, students are finding themselves in deep trouble. They're having big issues with the ability to use their First Amendment. Now, we've seen this in the way that we have the thought police over in the universities, where you need safe spaces and PC, being politically correct and limiting the way that you can speak. But it also takes another form as well, which troubles me a lot, especially since it falls in line with what I do. And that is for the school newspapers. In the region, that means the Fulcrum, the Ithacan, the BU Pipe Dream. These are all student journalism newspapers. And they are, as it's coming out, not only across this state, but across the nation, the students are not able to produce the news. They are held down by the administrations of the colleges, that they are not able to speak freely and not to report the news as journalists should. That here is something that's happening and that they can speak about it, and they're being shut down by the universities, which is wrong, because that's not how it's supposed to work. Whether they're students or not, if they have done the research using credible sources, first-hand sources, and are talking about an issue that is important to their university or the community at whole, they should make that announcement, and they should be able to publish that. And when they cannot do that, that's when we have the big issues. That's when we have the serious problems. And it trains people that, well, okay, you want to be in journalism? Understand that someone else is going to control what you're writing, and you have to have a message. And that's the wrong lesson to give to our young journalists. That is the wrong message to put out there. Because when we don't have that supervision, when we don't have journalists who are able to write and speak about what they think is important, well, that's when we start getting things missed. That's when things happen that shouldn't be happening. And I'll give you a great example of that. How about back in 2016? I know no one remembers this, going back in time a little bit, but it was back in 2016 at the Binghamton University, where there was a class called Stop White People 2K16. That's right. I'll say it again. Stop White People 2K 2016. And this was a legitimate class that was being taught to Binghamton University students and to the residential assistants on diversity, a very specific type of diversity that was going to be out there, telling these resident assistants, and therefore they were in charge of the dorms and the students that are there, and telling them about the white privilege and how to address that and how to frame and mold the discussions and arguments or conversations that students were having amongst each other. That's horrible. That is absolutely insane. That is just objectionable. And we wouldn't know about that except for the fact that the Binghamton Review, one of the newspapers in Binghamton University, made that choice to put that article out, to do their homework, get the facts straight, and to publish that. And it became national news in 2016. And in fact, that was August of 2016 that the article came out. Now, we would know about that if it weren't for the student journalists. And that's an important story. That is a majorly important issue. And it would only happen because students were able to tell us about it. But there are some who don't want that. Administrators at both Binghamton University, SUNY Broome, and all of the colleges throughout New York State, and all private colleges as well, they come in and they try to edit and they try to limit what students are able to speak about. That's wrong. That is wrong. And it directly goes against the First Amendment. And so I do give credit to Assemblywoman Donna Lapardo of the 123rd Assembly seat, when she put in Bill A9801. Again, that's A as in alpha, 9801. And you can look this up for yourself. It was put in back in February. February 9th of this year, 2018. And the only purpose of this bill is to guarantee the rights of students to be able to put in, to use the newspapers properly. It is in fact called the Student Journalist Free Speech Act. That's it. It's the Student Journalist Free Speech Act. And it's kind of sad that we have to go to our institutions of higher learning and to create a law to back up the existing law, which is called the First Amendment. And we have to go to the higher learning institutes and create a law to enforce a law that already exists and that they themselves should be promoting. What's wrong with our colleges and our universities and our community colleges when they can't even understand the First Amendment and therefore have to have another state level law to back that up? Something is going wrong. And this is a great bill because student journalists should be able to exercise that same First Amendment free speech that we use every day and our news organizations are supposed to use on every day in all of the things they do and that I do here. I tell you what, this is a problem. This is wrong. We need to do something about that. But I wanted to make sure that people were aware of it, because if we don't have the freedom of speech for our student journalists and are able to, like at the Binghamton Review, and to highlight issues that need to be discussed and need to be brought to the daylight to allow people to know what's going on behind their backs, if we don't do that, then we have journalists that grow up, they come out, and they are nothing more than propagandists telling the public a very partisan viewpoint that a micro minority of individuals are pushing out there, while the real news that affects people's lives are brushed aside and forgotten. So I stand behind this bill. I think it's very important. Again, when you're calling your state senator about the red flag laws, contact your state assembly person, whether it's or the candidate who's running for them. This is 2018, the midterm elections. Contact both of them and make sure they know that this bill, the Student Journalist Freedom Free Speech Act, should be passed, and should be passed now, so that starting in September of 2018, the newspapers like the Fulcrum and the SUNY Broome, like the Pipe Dream at Binghamton University, the Ithacan, and all the others are able to have free First Amendment speech. And I believe that strongly. And with that, I'm going to take another break. And I'm going to let you hear a little bit more from Matt Cornwell. And we're going to go with his also off of the Icarus album, track 14, which is As the World Turns.
I say, lately I'm feeling like we ain't got no damn patience. Excuses why we cannot do this face to face, and then we cry, wonder why we ain't on the same damn page. If there's one thing I know, it's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. Whoa, that this world keeps turning. That's one thing I learned. 'Cause mama don't sleep at night since the sun done up and died. Ain't no brother's keeper, and no one looking out for the sisters neither. And these families ain't no families. No one giving second chances. I don't understand why. It seems like this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. Yeah. Lately I'm feeling like you don't seem to be the the same way. Excuses, but it's written on your face. And then we fight another night. This time we've been wasting. No, I don't understand why we could have it all, throw it all away. Just cause everything we want don't go our way. Why? Why? Just take a look outside, people losing lives. I'm just trying to see this world is much bigger than you and I. Lady, I'm feeling like we could make this all okay. No excuses, girl, we need to find a way and take our time and do this right before this all fades away. Cause if there's one thing I learned, it's that this world keeps turning. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. It's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. It's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned.
All right, everybody. I'm hoping that you enjoy our new artist here. That is Matt Cornwell and his Icarus album. And I hope it was enjoyable. And this is the No Soundbites Allowed podcast with your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm so happy that you're here with me, back again and listening to the program, because you make it all worthwhile. You're the reason why I do this. And I thank you every time that you listen in. And so today we're talking about a lot of issues of the First Amendment, and we're talking about the Second Amendment, and all the things that are not being told and not spoken about, things that you aren't hearing about from anywhere else, and you should be, and things that are going to affect you. I mean, whether it's your privacy in your own home, one day you're sitting there and suddenly the police break into the house trying to take your firearm because someone, who knows who, decided that you're a danger just because, or maybe they're just mad at you. Who knows? And meanwhile, you didn't have a chance to defend yourself in court. We were talking about the fact that if that were to happen and a student newspaper was there and they wanted to report on it, they wouldn't be able to do so because that university, that organization, that administration would block them and stop them from putting out that article. And that's something that's unheard of. It's insane for a newspaper not to put out accurate information that is firsthand, well-sourced, well-written, and accurate. And that's insane. And that's our problem, not just for today, but it goes forward into the future and what we're going to see in our newspapers and our social media going forward. It's propaganda from the top all the way down. And this affects us, and that allows things like the violation of our Fourth Amendment and Second Amendment rights to go on, because they're violating the First Amendment as well. But that's not all I wanted to talk about. Let me go on, because the other thing I wanted to talk about, which is related to that, is now there's this sudden brouhaha going on about President Trump and his use of his executive power. In particular, we're talking about the ability to give pardons. And we saw a lot of news about that last week when President Trump decided to give a pardon to Dinesh D'Souza. And suddenly we're hearing people say, well, the president can't give out a pardon while he's in office. And the president, which is absolutely ridiculous. There is absolutely no limitation on the president when he gives out a pardon. It's not that, he can give it out to turkeys every year, and then when he leaves office, he's able to give out pardons. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that he can't give out a pardon, as happened last week. You can give out a pardon anytime you want. That's part of the power of the president. And I think the problem is a lot of people don't know that. And so when they hear the news media talking about that, they take it out of context. They don't know that the news media and some of the far left, some of the individuals are taking this out of context and warping the information that's being given to the public. Oh, how dare he? He can't do that. That's against protocol. Well, it may be against protocol. It may not be something that we saw President Obama do. Maybe it's not something that President Bush or President Clinton did. There's absolutely nothing that says he can't do it. It's perfectly well within his power. In fact, this argument continued just in Sunday when we heard Rudy Giuliani mentioning that the president could pardon himself. Well, he can. It's absolutely legal. It's not important because it's a power that has always existed. Since we had the Constitution ratified, I think it was 1789, if I remember my dates correctly, when the Constitution was ratified, that was always a power of the president. In fact, if you go to Article 2, Section 2, and you can read this yourself, it's in the first clause, which means the first paragraph, you'll read, it states in there, the section that's relevant is, and he shall have, he being the president, he shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in the cases of impeachment. There's the limitation. So in other words, the president can pardon any individual or any group of individuals other than a class of people for any reason other than impeachment. Now, let me be clear. So we saw this. President Carter, he pardoned all of the people who protested the war and did not, and there was, at the time we had a draft, and all the draft dodgers were pardoned for the crime, which was treason, to not participate in the war. They were drafted. They were supposed to go into the military. They ran to Canada. And technically, they would be living there today if it were not for President Carter giving them a pardon, which is in his power to be able to do so. So to see that President Trump do the same thing for Dinesh D'Souza is absolutely in his realm of power. And in fact, if President Trump wanted to give himself a pardon, he could for this Russia collusion thing, which has no crime. So far, no one has found a crime that's been committed. 18 months later, actually more, they started this whole thing before President Trump even got elected. And there has yet to be proof of anything wrong done by President Trump or his team in relation to the 2016 election, although there's been a lot of problems found on the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton's team, and now seeming President Obama and the FBI. There's a lot of evidence that seems to indicate that they broke laws or were abusing their power, but none of that's coming from the Trump campaign. So if anyone needs the pardon, it's going to be Hillary Clinton, President Obama, the FBI. They need the pardon. But yet we're hearing people scream, oh, how could you possibly say that? And again, it wasn't that President Trump said that he would pardon himself. And I admit, if he did, I'd have a problem with that. And he would probably get impeached immediately because of it. But I'm not saying that he would. But this isn't, and if you listen to the hype about this, you suddenly realize the media is misleading you once you do some looking, you look back at history. Because this isn't the first time it's happened. Actually, if you go back in time, you can see that President Nixon had a conversation. He spoke about that in 1974. He was talking about whether or not a president could pardon himself, and he could. And then again in 1998, under President Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was looking at whether or not he could pardon himself from his problems during his impeachment, although the clause did say you can't do that because of an impeachment. But he was investigating whether or not the pardon power of the presidency would protect him. So there is precedence in this. We have at least two other presidents who've gone through this process asking the very same question. Everyone is going ballistic right now because President Trump said something, not even President Trump. Rudy Giuliani, the lawyer for the president, said that this is one of the powers of the president and he could even do that. That's how meaningless this whole case is. But everyone's blowing it out of proportion saying, well, you can't do that. That's not his power. Yes, it is. The biggest problem we're seeing here, and this is true of all the things I'm speaking about today. Look at this. Look at this very carefully. It's because people don't know the Constitution. They don't know what rights they have, the absolute rights that are given to us. It's very important. The Constitution lays out very clearly, these are absolute rights of the people, the absolute limitations of the government, and anything that is not mentioned in there. The 10th Amendment, one of the most important ones of all, any power not noted, anything that is not stated in the Constitution or the amendments, excuse me, is a power that belongs to the people. And that's important because every time we make a law, we lose a freedom. That is just that's the way our government is built. You have the right to do everything up until someone makes a law. Once we make that law, now it's enumerated. We have it as one of the laws, and you no longer have that right based on the nature of that law. That's why we have all the power, and the government only has the powers that are written, that are put out there. So until we make a law, the government has no power over something. If you want to wear blue jeans, you can do so at any point in time that you want. But the second that there's a law that says you can only wear blue jeans on Thursdays, you no longer have the right to wear a blue jean on Monday. Sounds really silly. That's how it works. I'm giving you the simplest example I can so that everyone is very clear about this. You have the right to do anything you want until there is a law, and then you are limited by that law. The government can't do anything unless there is a law. So going back to the stories we were talking about, in the Second Amendment, when we're talking about the Second Amendment, every American has the right to own a firearm. We have laws that have limited when people can use that right and the ways they can use that right. It's your right. And the only time the government can step in is because we've written a law that says, well, you can only do it this way. It's your right. Absolute. Until the government writes a law, and now you lose a portion of your freedom. When we were looking at the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, talking about journalism. Journalists are free to write the truth about what happens around them, except when we have a law that says, well, they can only talk about certain things. So if you're looking at some of the colleges that are saying, well, the administration has to approve it, well, now it's no longer your right. We can correct that. That's what the Student Journalism Free Speech Act does, is corrects that and brings it back to the First Amendment. But if you don't know that you have the freedom of speech and you have the freedom of the press to write accurate, true information, then you'll never exercise that and the government will take advantage of you. If you don't know that you have the Fourth Amendment right to privacy, which means, and you have the right to due process, so that means you have to be brought in front of a court to be able to take away your private property. If you don't know that, then when someone else makes a complaint under a red flag law and says that you're a danger and they just bust down your door and take your firearms, you don't know what to do next. You have the right to your privacy and to those firearms. The government can't just do that unless we allow this law, the red flag laws, the extreme risk protection orders to go through, and suddenly you lose the right to your privacy, you lose the right to your property, and the government and the courts get to take that away from you. They have the power. This is all very important. We need to know our rights. We need to know what we can do. And so talking about these old stories and some of the newer stories and the way that the media right now is misrepresenting some of the information, please look at your Constitution. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to agree with me. I'm not asking anyone to do either of those things. I'm asking you to be informed. Find out for yourself. Read what is actually there. Because if you're relying on the news media to tell you stuff, they're not. They're going to tell you the story they want to tell you. They're going to tell you the story from the point of view that benefits them, not how it actually is. I read Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, that's the first paragraph of the Constitution. Now you know that, yes, President Trump has the power of pardons, just like Bill Clinton did, just like Nixon did. And you have all the power in this nation. except once we allow that power to be given to the government. That's the only time they have it. Know that. Know your rights. Because when we know our rights, our government is far, far better. And when we don't, we get a corrupt government. Look at New York State. People don't know the laws, don't know what their rights are, and we have a Governor Cuomo who is surrounded, and I am sure personally, I believe, that he is as corrupt as the day is long. We are in Tammany Hall 2.0 because people just don't know what their rights are. Find out your rights. Use them how you want. Use them to disagree with me. Use them to enact laws I don't like, or the ones that I do. That's up to you. That's your choice. Know what your laws, what your rights are. Don't let government take your rights away for no reason, just because you don't know. But that's my episode today, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative and useful. Do let me know what you think. You can reach me on Facebook under my name, Michael Voss. You can find me on Twitter at mvconsult. You can contact me by email at info@vossconsult, VASSconsult.com. I always look forward, and you can always make comments here on the podcast or on Facebook, and I look forward to seeing that. And until next time, I hope that you're going to have a great day. We're going to listen to Adam Ate the Apple, a great band, and their No Flying Cars album. We're going to listen to the song Matches, because I think that's kind of appropriate to the situation. And until then, I hope everyone has a great week.
I bring the matches, you bring the gasoline. Let's do it right, oh let's make a scene. There's no survivors, no survivors on this road we're on. Lead me astray, you little pussycat. Let's take this day and make it a disaster. Oh, I know what you're after. Happily ever after ain't a joke to you. You still the hand, won the night. Yes, Lord, will you please spare this life? He said no. There's no survivors on this road. Bring the matches, you bring the gasoline. Let's do it right, oh let's make a scene. There's no survivors, no survivors on this road. No survivors, no survivors on this road.